Okay, well, welcome everybody to Talking Niagara on YouTube again. I'm hoping we can get through this in the next couple of weeks because we can, I can set up a page once I've done 2 weeks worth of, I can broadcast to my profile once I'm a 2 week old, once I'm 2 weeks old,
How
right?
old are you now?
Like 4 days.
Okay,
New
but
Facebook profile probably about 5 days now.
10 short days.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so
Who can see it? Well, do we have our
we have people. We do have watchers.
our listener
We had
base?
Chris Simone on YouTube last time. Okay, so
Oh, that's
welcome
true.
everybody. Okay, so first item we got on here: University of Canada, University of Niagara Falls in Canada is prepared to welcome about 1,000 students for its first semester this well, September, I guess. Basically, they've been questions about where they're going to accommodate the students, etc., etc.
Yes.
And quite naturally, so you and I asked these questions, 2 years ago, didn't we?
Yes, we did. And this is a big issue because of the shortage of residential homes or properties, and the University of Niagara Falls is about to admit 1,000 people coming this fall. If they all come, that means they'll bring their families too. They are entitled to bring. I think those people in CERT programs are allowed to bring their families,
Yeah.
which means
Well,
there will be a very quite a considerable stress on our available housing.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And the thing is, they don't seem to have. They've not done anything. They're basing it, leaving it up to the students to find homes.
Well, they say they have plans to build a dormitory, and they have independent plans uh, to or intermediary plans to house those people to come. They also claim that not all will come, some will be online participants.
Yeah,
This is all very, very interesting because of the situation we find ourselves in, and it is very, very like Councilor Coco has brought this to the attention, I think, of council, and she's even suggested that these new students that are coming into town may have to use the resources of Project Share, the Salvation Army, and other charitable
yeah.
organizations. That's rather alarming, don't you think? If we're
Oh, that
bringing
bothers
students,
that
yeah,
bothers me very much. Yeah.
yeah,
Project Share, Soup Kitchen, Salvation Army, Third Space Cafe. Well, Third Space Cafe being where it is located, I would imagine would be a regular jaunt for the kids there. For the kids in that university, irrespective of whether they need free food or not.
yeah. Why would a student need free food when a student, whether they're a foreign student or a domestic student, comes to a university? They don't go to the charities and ask for food. They don't go to the food kitchens or the soup kitchens and so on. They don't go to Salvation Army. These are students. They are
Yeah,
supposed to be self um, self providing, basically.
yeah, yeah,
So the fact that Consulate Coco has mentioned the Project Share and Salvation Army and others, that why would she? Is she suspecting that that Niagara Falls University is really not prepared to bring the people in, as they have said. Have they assuaged the council of any kind of concerns this way? And I don't think they have, if you read the article.
No,
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not a lot in the least impressed either, you know?
No, I haven't got any kind of real confidence that this university can actually do what it says it does.
Yeah.
We also have to remember that there are a lot of universities. Although it's a big business in Ontario or Canada at large to bring in foreign students, there's a lot of money coming in. However, we have this is a backdoor way to get into Canada, and Canada has actually had conditions by which you can bring a student in, and you have to prove that you have a place for them, where they can live. And I'm not so sure that the University of Canada has responded that way. It is said that like they have a spokesperson by the name of Cindy McLeod, says that the meeting, how the private company will accommodate incoming students and their families. But how? They really haven't said how they'll do that.
She's president of the university.
Yes, which is I don't know, very concerning here. She says she's the president of the university, and she's noted a couple different things how they're going to do it. Eventually, they'll have a dormitory. They'll build a dormitory, but they don't have one yet, and they have some intermediary means by which to house them. But I'm not too confident in what she says about how that's going to happen. Now, nothing's going to stop these students from coming in because it's a big deal for Niagara Falls to have a university. But remember, this is a private university, and I'm not so sure how well accredited it is either. That's never been made clear to me.
Well, I just have not been, I'm not impressed by the programs I hear that they're running, and they're not talking about programs here.
No, but they do say things like if the families are doing their masters, they can bring their whole family.
Yeah.
What is the qualifications for that, though? I mean, can Joe Smith or anyone, let's say from India or something, come along?
You've already got to have had an undergraduate degree.
From where, though? And this is the problem I have a problem with, is how accredited is it? I mean, you can go online and get any kind of course. I had a friend that did a course, online university course, but when I looked at his paperwork and the exams he was doing, they're very, very they were like multiple choice, aim you at the right answer type questions. So
but many exam questions these days tend to be multiple choice because you can get you don't have to pay lecturers to mark exams.
You didn't hear the second part. You didn't hear the second part I said. When I said that they were multiple choice questions that aimed you at the right answer.
Oh.
Basically, questions like, if you have a red light, where would you most likely find it? On a traffic light, at the very top, at the bottom of the traffic light, at the middle of the traffic light, that kind of thing. Some very obvious ways of answering the question will lead you right to the answer. That was what I was talking about. And I have nothing against multiple choice questions if they are real ones, but you have a lot of uncredited universities that you can get a degree in very quickly. As a matter of fact, you can buy them sometimes.
Oh,
I
that's
know a guy
true as well.
who
There's always been American universities you can buy degrees from. Yeah.
yeah, or do a very simple, easy test, and they'll give you a credit. In fact, a friend of mine bought for, I think it was $28. He bought a certificate that said that he was a reverend, that he had passed all the requirements to become a reverend, and he got a certificate. And he uses that on his radio show. So he calls himself the Most Reverend T.A. Lyle, Reverend T.A. Lyle. But he's gone to no seminary school or nothing. But he's got a big certificate that said that he's a reverend, the Most Reverend. So this is the kind of things I'm talking about. So when we have people coming here and they're on a master's degree, where did they get that master's degree? Who is screening them? Is the Niagara Falls University just a step off for potential students, or is potential ways in which to get what's that? University of Niagara Falls, Canada is prepared to welcome 1,000 students for
No.
fall.
Karen Fraser says good morning on Facebook, on YouTube.
Oh, it just popped up now. Hi, Karen. How you doing? Anyway, so the whole idea of this university, is it going to be the Coconut College, or is it going to be a real one?
Yeah.
Sort of? You can go to any college, any university, anywhere, and is it going to hold anything, or is it just another way? Another backdoor way into Canada? And I have a feeling that it might be one of those. I've got no proof for it, but when a counselor says we're going to have 1,000 people coming in, or 1,000 students possibly coming to the Niagara Falls, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of facilities ready for them. They're going to be in the Hatch building, basically, right next door to the City Hall. Where they're going to stay, that's not clearly pointed out. And
yeah,
also,
the student facilities at Hatch, I'm sure, are fine. The classrooms, etc., at the Hatch building, I'm sure there's not a problem with. I'm sure it's everything else that's the problem.
Yeah, I mean, anybody can rent rooms and put a teacher in it.
Yeah.
But the bigger problem is where they're going to stay. And when you have Councillor Lococo pointing out things like Project Share and Salvation Army and things like this, that's a red flag to me.
Oh, yeah.
It tells me that Councillor Lococo is not too confident in what Cindy McLeod has told the council or reported to them earlier. What is going to be, where are they going to stay? What are they going to eat? And I'm not quite sure that the Niagara Falls University has answered that correctly. Otherwise, it wouldn't be talking about it and talking about Project Share and Salvation Army.
No,
as a means by which the new students can now survive in Niagara Falls.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Is this university just a backdoor institution to get people into the country? I mean, that is we see that all the time in India and other places, but particularly India. I've seen where they get a young person and they get them a student and they guarantee them a way into Canada and a school to go to. And we've heard about the corner store type, the strip mall type universities that really don't teach much of anything, but have a name. And based on that name, the University of Coconut College and or Fred's University, and a student comes in on that. I'm going to be attending Fred's University, and it's in a strip mall. And the guy or girl gets into the country. And that's basically what they really wanted to do in the first place. And once they're here, then they can just stay.
Well, I think that
And
setting up a university is a real tough thing, right? Should be.
yes. Now, is it a real university though? That's my questions in the very beginning from this university. It's a global university, but when somebody comes out of Niagara University with a degree, is it going to be taken seriously by any employer?
Yeah. Very good. Absolutely. This has been the question with this university. University of Niagara Falls, Canada, has been same question since the very concept of it in the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to say, like, if you get a degree out of the University of Niagara Falls, and it's not totally accredited, like I think they claim to be accredited, but I'm not quite sure that they are. And there's nothing wrong with a private university. There's all kinds of them. But when people hire people from a certain university, whether it's Yale or whether it's Brock or whatever, they have a certain confidence of the level of ability that somebody comes up with. Now, Karen Fraser has just pointed out the city plans on building approximately 20 apartment buildings on Bridge Street near the train station. Yeah,
but these are high-end apartments, Karen.
Yeah, and I welcome the apartments on Bridge Street, but will they are they associated at all with the university? The university says they're going to build a dormitory, but that dormitory has not been built.
Yeah.
Now they do couch their comments by saying, "Oh, by the way, not all 1,000 people will come," but if they bring their families, let's say 250 of them do come here and they bring their families, there's going to be that's 250 units of housing we have that Niagara Falls University has to provide, and they say they have some facilities on Lundy's Lane, but I don't know if they have enough.
Well, in fact, actually, if you want to get your best out, go to Brock University. Where do they put their first years? On campus, right? Go to many universities. They put their first years on campus, right? And there's a reason for that. And that reason is that the closer you keep them to the lessons, the more likely they are to actually focus on the, particularly during their first year.
Yeah. Well, the question is, they do propose, they have a proposal of where they're going to keep them temporarily until this dormitory is started, and they do mention a few places, one of which is on Lundy's Lane. And I can't bring up the article for some reason, but I feel that.
We've committed to. Well, it says here we've committed to a 125 bed dormitory on Lundy's Lane with double and single occupancy suites. Right.
What's that?
Adding university partners with local organizations such as Forstay, Spaces Shared, and Niagara Homestay, and is exploring other options. We have staffing in place. We have housing coordinators and student services support. As a leadership team, we're thinking about this on a daily basis, and we're being very proactive. That's what they're saying.
Yeah, but they haven't said that they have established with any kind of firm.
No. When
you know,
think
so
about it,
they're bringing them in, but they haven't yet established these and made them permanent.
Yeah,
they're in discussions with.
We're a month away, and they don't. They're not 100% certain, is what I'm getting here, right?
Yeah, it says and then they say things, the general comments like, "We're committed to offering each student a meaningful, supportive experience where they can thrive academically and personally. Yeah, that doesn't tell us much, though, does it? It sounds wonderful, but it's got no substance.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it says we are committed to 125 bed dormitory at Lundy's Lane with double the single occupancy, and partners with, like you said, Forstay, Spaces Shared, and Niagara Homestay. However, how much is that going to cost? And when you're still talking, when you have a counselor talking about Project Share Salvation Army and also talking about where these kids are going to go to school if they bring their kids, that's another problem. And we've noticed that from the Roxham Road asylum seekers. They swamped the area schools. The governments, the feds kept it quiet so that we couldn't prepare. Yeah. When the Ontario government found out about it, they couldn't do anything, and they've never really established any permanent way in which to address the asylum seekers, because the asylum seekers are a intrepid bunch. They may come and they may go. That's the expectation. But since they've come here, they're going to stay here because they're in nice hotels and things like that. And so their children go to our schools. But the provincial government has not accommodated that. They have simply based their enrollment on previous numbers of permanent residents. And in every fall, when these new kids, and they may have been going to those schools for a year or two now or more, they still haven't prepared for that extra amount of children going to the schools. And that's on the provincial side. So when they say, okay, well, we did have 1,000 kids, now we got 1,200, the province still prepares for only 1,000 because they are not permanent residents, basically, these kids. So I don't know, it's really frustrating. So what are they going to do with the kids that come with the new students? They are supposed to pay the government back the fee for, you can get your kid into school, any of the public schools, but you're going to have to pay for it. Like our taxpayers pay for the asylum seeker kids, but they won't be on the hook for these kids coming from other places. So when you show up with a kid and there's a kid and he's got to go to school, and the students, the mother or father who's going to Niagara Falls University, don't have enough money to pay the Ontario government, and then they go back home, who's on the hook for it? It'll be the taxpayer again. So there's a lot of problems here. To be compliant with the Ministry of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenships, all international students need to prove they have funds necessary to meet a minimum cost of living, which is $20,000 per year. And that, if they bring their family, that isn't enough.
Well, they bring their family, that's not enough. But if they're coming alone, right? I suspect
they come alone and they're provided cheap accommodations, but still $20,000. I mean, that hardly feed you.
Yeah, I know. All right.
And then there's school supplies to boot.
Sorry?
And there's school supplies to boot on top of that.
Yeah. Okay, so welcome back, Dave, says 881 Slick.
Thank you. Thanks, Slick.
I'm sure I'm familiar with their Facebook handle, just don't know the YouTube one. Okay, so moving on. Several Niagara restaurants were ordered to close temporarily following health inspections. The health inspectors seem to be getting quite vicious, don't they?
Well, as you notice, there's all kinds of restaurants popping open. I mean, there's always been a lot of restaurants in and around here. but there's all kinds of them. It seems like if you don't know what else to like, a lot of new Canadians will open up restaurants because that's one way of starting it. But whether it's an old restaurant, well established, or a new one, they have to be vetted once in a while. And we've had three here. That,
plus we had about half a dozen earlier in the year as well. Back in May, we had about half a dozen that were closed.
Well, there's a couple of things that is comforting to me, that they're actually out there doing what they're supposed to be doing, or at least it appears that way. And the three restaurants that were closed up seem to have had minor problems overall, and they were able to get back into business quickly after the inspectors come through. Food inspectors used to be typically paid off. Actually, I knew a guy that was a food inspector for the region, and he was taking bribes all the time, and he had no qualms about telling me about that. And I mean, that's many, many years ago, though. So maybe now the new food inspectors are diligent, and they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. But we have a lot of restaurants, and let's face it, we have a lot of new people opening restaurants, and the conditions by which they maintain the health requirements of a restaurant is maybe those things get overlooked. There's not enough refrigeration. There's not enough hot water. There's not enough this or that. Yeah. There's the washrooms they provide. In one of the cases, the washrooms they provide were not up to standard. One of the outfits didn't have enough proper refrigeration to keep the food or certain ingredients in the food at 4 degrees or below Fahrenheit or something like that. I think, or maybe it was centigrade. But anyway, there has to be. Otherwise, the food begins to go bad, and if it starts to go bad, then you have a problem. And
the one that had the trouble was a food truck. With
one of them was a food truck.
Yeah.
So there was three all
together. Trouble with the temperature was the food truck, lack of portable hot water supply, and cold. It didn't maintain the fridge wasn't maintaining a low temperature.
Yeah, so all this stuff is very important, and with all new restaurants popping up and from all over the world, they get brand new people coming from a different country that may have had a restaurant in, I don't know, Vietnam or something, and then maybe the conditions there weren't as rigid as they are here. Yeah. So I think it's very important that this happens. And it doesn't have to be from. I remember a restaurant not far from me here, maybe about half a mile up the road. It was closed down for a week. And they were taking chicken wings and stuff like that people didn't eat, and then throwing them back in the fryer and putting them back out for the next person to come around. That kind of thing. That's
a bad thing to do anyway, because of the fact that refried food is just really refrying is not a good thing.
Yeah, instead of throwing out the food that wasn't eaten, they try to recycle it back, and that's kind of gross, all in all.
Yeah.
I knew a person that worked in a small food mart, and she was instructed to wash certain meats when they started going green with vinegar, because that would take the green off of it when they started going off. So there's kind of things like that do happen.
Yeah.
But I don't know. The fact that these things are published, I think it's a very good idea, and I think it's a very good idea that the names of the particular restaurants are published too, because that's a huge incentive for them to, get everything in order and keep it that way. They don't want to be on that list too often.
No, you don't. You don't want to be on that list too often. So
I know people won't go to a restaurant. If they want to go to a restaurant, they'll look it up in the public health and see how many violations they've had. And if they've had too many, or even any, that person won't go there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, basically, in talking about ethnicity, you got one Mexican, one Japanese sushi place, and one Indian place, right?
Yeah, it could be just the fact that new Canadians don't really think of the standards that we have. Although I was in India for 18 days, and I ate in every restaurant there was, even the most humble of ones, and I can't and I can't complain about how they were preparing the food because I could see how they were doing it in a lot of places.
Yeah,
and even in the most humblest little place, had a certain standard that they maintained. I don't think they would be able to stay in business too long in their own little cities if they were bad. I mean, in Thailand, one of the best meals I ever got in Thailand was a little hole in the wall, and in Bangkok, and it was delicious. It was the best food I had, and it was the cheapest too.
Yeah, it's ironic about that. But even so, in some places like India, when I was out there, there was a thing saying that you shouldn't eat at most of the street vendors because they couldn't provide water that was free of typhoid.
Well, a street vendor in a restaurant's a little bit different too. Eh?
Yeah, of course. All right. Anyway, So it is what it is. We move on, right?
Oh, right. Yep.
So in Welland, the Welland Festival is basically, they're saying it's showing more diversity than ever before.
Well, this was an Afro type of Afro-Canadian type of festival, wasn't it? And it wasn't just like a Caribbean things. I mean, these are people who are from Nigeria and so on.
Well, looking at the pictures on the face, the pictures, I can see what clearly looks like a West Indian guy. I can see a guy that looks very, very Indian. I can see a guy that looks very, from Africa. Very much, So yes, I'm guessing that's what they're talking about. The news, the diversity. I'd like to see us have some of these in Niagara Falls.
I don't know. Sure, during I think so too. I think we could probably have this one was the Afro-Caribbean Festival. So when you think of Caribbean, you most normally think of those people of the population there of African descent, but this meant Afro, meaning also from Africa, not just Caribbean.
Yeah.
No, it's not like Afro-Canadian or Afro-Caribbean. It's Afro and Caribbean.
Yeah. The thing is, I'd like to see more of these, that we can have them open in our local area. I remember them we used to have them regularly where I lived in England. What would happen is they'd have a fun fair, and then they'd have wrapped around it a cultural foods.
Well, yeah, they had. They used to have this in Toronto. They shut down the city, and you'd go to different places, and you go to the English one, and you go one. Yeah, you go to, but in that case, it wasn't just the Caribbean festival. It was like for all nationalities.
Yeah.
And what you'd get was a little visa. You get this little book or something. It was a visa which entitled you to go into each different um, each different cultural communities.
So your entrance payment would actually help you buy food.
Well, no, it just got you in there, and then you could buy the food later, and it was all cheap, and they had entertainment, and they would have, whatever typical entertainments. Of course, you get steel drums in the Caribbean, but also the Caribbean Festival in Toronto is huge, and so they compare this one to that, and
for
they
example,
expect that this is.
I was going to say, for example, on Danforth, there used to be a restaurant festival, wasn't there, on Danforth? I seem to remember.
Yeah. Well, yeah. That was something as well. But it's interesting here. We have Juliet from Nigeria, and she's being spoken to, and she's a refugee from Nigeria, and she is very, very happy to be here in Canada and has felt very welcomed here. But notice they don't use her last name, and they point out they don't use her last name to protect her from insurgents back in Nigeria.
Yeah.
And Nigeria, you would think, is it's hard to say. There's so many different ethnic groups in Nigeria that you can kind of understand there'll be problems there. But what they meant by insurgents here, I don't know. I know in the northern part of the country they have suffer from Islamic terrorism quite often. And of course the different groups, the different ethnic groups there are also quite rival one another quite a bit.
Yeah.
If you're old enough, you'll remember the civil wars that were happening there, Biafra in Nigeria and all that.
Oh, I certainly remember them. Yeah.
So this is Welland Afro, as well as the Welland Salsa and Cumbia Festival, focusing on Latino culture. I think this will be probably something we could really bring into Niagara Falls. That would be good, particularly off season. I think if you wanted to invite these festivals into Niagara Falls, it'd be a great time to do it off season.
Well, we used to have them. We used to have one that was called Springlicious, which was the last weekend in May or the first weekend in June, down on Queen Street. That was great. I loved it.
Yeah, but it somehow can't maintain itself. So I think probably if we that could fill up a lot of the hotels and things like that off season if you brought them in off season. I don't know. That's just I might be a little bit naive there, suggesting that you could just do that, but it would be kind of cool to have that. You imagine an Afro-Caribbean festival, let's say in September or October. It would be damn cool. This is Slick says, "Got to be honest, it's refreshing to have you back, Dave." Thanks, Slick. Thanks a lot. I'm glad to be welcomed back.
Will you be on your City, Your Voice today?
Yes, I will be. I will be, Slick. But I've been forewarned by Paul that I have to be that the agenda that we're going to cover is going to be long, and that I have to be brief. And I think Paul's already all set up for it to be brief and quick. So he's given me 2 warnings, and so I'll have to stifle my verbosity.
That's going to be tough for you, isn't it?
I will. Believe me, I'm not that prepared for this agenda, so I'll probably just sit there and shut up most of the time.
Yeah. Well, actually, the one thing about it is that the August agenda, whilst it might be long, generally isn't that arduous an agenda, because probably half the council won't be there.
Well, Paul Lemire believes that it is an important one. And, so we'll we'll cover. Well, he will, because he's been prepared for days on this already.
Yeah.
So, I think I messaged him on Friday, I think, or maybe it was Saturday. I says, well, I'm back in town now. If you need a second for the agenda, and he says, oh, well, you can't come in, but you got to be brief. It's a really long one and some important points. And then he's told me that again this morning already. He's an early riser, so.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. All right. Okay, where else? Okay. Yeah, this is a quite an important one. Canada Post is basically saying, keep your dogs in check. They're asking Niagara residents to restrain their dogs to allow carriers to safely deliver mail to their homes without fear of for their personal safety.
Yes, this is something that's been going on for years and years and years.
It has.
I used to deliver for Canada Post from a private company as subcontracted to the Canada Post, Dime Delivery, I think it was called. And for a few months, I did that. I drove around in a van and dropped off parcels in a certain route in Niagara Falls. And I would get out to drop off the parcels, and I'd be attacked by dogs. And one in particular down in Silvertown, God, he was a clever dog. He'd hide. He was always outside, but he'd hide, and I couldn't see him. And I'd come with a parcel, and he'd dart out of nowhere. And I never got bit by him, but I got close a couple times. And I'm telling you, a few times I felt like throwing the parcel into the yard because I couldn't get there. And unfortunately, and they've talked about how postmen are now protecting themselves. They have a loud horn in their bag, which they can blow if a dog begins to attack them, and that's supposed to scare the dog away. Some have spray, kind of a pepper spray, to protect them from the dog, which would make the owner very upset normally. And some of them even give little milk bones. Some even give little milk bones to the dogs to make friends with them. But they have discouraged on the latter one, they've discouraged the dogs, the postman from giving those little milk bones or cookies to the dogs, because the dog then expects one every time. So if you have a new carrier come along and they don't know that, then the dog gets upset.
Actually, one of the things when I was during the election, I had this dog just suddenly come running around the house before I even got to the house. Come running around the house. This dog was trying to lick me to death. The dog was actually, so friendly. I heard him barking, yapping from a way away. And when I got to a certain point, he just charged out and wanted to lick me to death.
Well, as long as they don't love you too much and then start getting amorous and start humping your leg or something like that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, the thing is about this is it's got to be a constant problem for postal workers. They've got to get to your front door in order to deliver the mail. In some respects, it would be better to leave the mail, getting to the front door should be fairly easy and should be generally open, right?
Well, the problem is the door opens up and the dog gets out. And that's the problem. So if you're delivering a parcel and somebody opens the door and the dog gets out. And anyone who's had a dog will know that no matter how many precautions you take, somehow they find a way of getting out from time to time. So and also a dog's instinct is to protect the property, protect the family. Yeah. And it will bark and it will growl and everything. If the dog happens to be a particularly aggressive type, then you might get bit.
Yeah.
And that dog's only doing what it thinks it's supposed to do.
Yeah, they're basically saying along the concerns for Canada Post is dogs forcing their way through closed screen doors, or dogs slipping by their owners as they interact with the carriers at the door. The door opens and the chase is on.
Yeah. So anyway, I think there are more and more responsible dog owners over there, but there's always a lot that aren't out there. And there's always the person say, "Oh, that dog will never hurt you," and then it bites you.
Oh yeah.
I knew a person when I lived in Peterborough, and she had a daughter, and her daughter had a huge scar right down her face, terrible looking thing, from the top of her head right down through the middle of her cheek, right down, and and that scar will be on that person for the rest of their life. And what they did is they went to visit somebody, and they had a dog, and the little kid saw the dog in the backyard. Then the owner assured, "Oh, that dog is a gentle dog and never hurt anybody." Next thing you know, the dog is ripping the child apart.
Yeah.
So so you cannot, you never know what the dog's going to do and how it's going to react. And believe me, that scar was terrible.
Yeah.
And,
I can believe it. I can believe it. Yeah. Yeah. You know, and it's awful. You know, it's awful what can happen. And the thing is that I don't know. Most of the time, dogs are kept responsibly, either in the backyard or in the home, right? And
but there's also the idiot, like my
oh yeah,
my sister-in-law's neighbor. There was an old guy there. He had an old cat on his porch, and somebody had a pit bull in the park right across the street. It got away from the owner, and it killed the cat.
Yeah,
it came right up on the porch and ripped the cat apart.
Yeah,
and the owner just couldn't care less.
Yeah, well, and yeah, that's actually what's worse, right? And most, I know some people who've had pit bulls, and they say, "Yeah, I have to wear it has to wear a muzzle, but it doesn't do, it's actually not a danger to anybody."
Oh, yeah.
Right? And I've seen other pit bulls which are really dangerous. Wouldn't want to be near.
Yeah, I don't know. I saw a guy one time walking down the street, and he had like two pit bulls on leashes, and they're growling, snarling at everybody. And and he just was in his glory, looking at everybody. I got power, It was just like, there are those idiots out there.
Yeah,
but for the most part, people have a dog for companionship, and dogs are really good. But remember, you can never know what exactly a dog will do.
Absolutely, yeah. All right. So where next? Okay, okay. We got a comment. Pay pup a ransom of treats. What a hustle! Absolutely, it is a hustle. Yeah.
Yeah, dogs aren't dumb, right?
They're not dumb. No, they're not dumb.
All right.
And both cats and dogs share a reasonable amount of intelligence. That's for sure.
Well, yeah, okay. And yeah, dogs are pretty smart. I had a little dog one time, and it thought it was a lot bigger than it was. It was only 11 pounds. So it attacked these two big dogs one time, and it got beat up pretty bad, and his leg got damaged, and he got away from the leash I had on it, and then I had to carry it home, and it had this its arm was limp, or its paw was limp like this. And then for the next few days, I would just see it like this, and I would pay it a lot of attention and so on. Then I realized it would use the other limb, right? And wait a minute, what are you doing there? You're pretending it's your left one when it was your right one. So he started to learn that all he had to do was lift up a paw, and he'd get a lot of attention. So his big mistake was that he decided any paw would do, right or left. Right?
back one's hanging off this time, right?
Yeah. So I said, so and I looked at him and I says, you can't fool me. I got twice your intelligence.
But he got away with it at least once.
Oh, I got away with it a few times. Like until I realized that he was faking it. I'm thinking, oh man, like should I take him to the vet or whatever? And then he'd see me and he'd kind of hobble with the one. Then I realized, hey, wait a minute. He's using both. He's just faking it. He's just looking for attention.
Yeah. Okay, so it's going to cost Niagara on the Lake $200,000 to complete the next phase of Niagara on the Lake's Upper Canada Heritage Trail.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good thing all in all. Although they're, I mentioned Paul Calamere a little while ago. He has pointed out that maybe we're putting too many trails out there and it's costing too much money when we already have an abundance of trails. I don't think we can have enough, in my opinion. And they're looking for 200,000.
Why are we spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to create a trail that presumably already is walkable already?
Well, it's not. It has to be there has to be drainage on some parts of the pathway, particularly those that ascend a certain incline. So there has to be safety features, and it has to be of a condition that can be maintained and used for a length of time. So I think it's a good thing, and the cost is really not that prohibitive. They need another $100,000 right now. And I think once they get it done, it will be very good and a great boon to the people of the community and tourists too. There are trails. There's all kinds of trails, Millennium Trails, the bike trails that go through the green belt. There are hiking trails that go all the way up to the Bruce Peninsula. I think this is all very good. When you have an increasing population, it's wise to start to establish areas where ordinary people can go, including those of humble means, and they can also enjoy these pathways and walkways and so on. The problem is, it gets to the point where people buy properties on lakes and rural properties, and it's their own domain. But you have to have a lot of public areas for people, particularly people of humble means, so they can go for a walk or have a picnic or something like that.
Well, I definitely think it's a good idea to be having these walking areas. Though some of these trails probably need to be a bit more rough and ready than anything else, right? Do we really need to have everyone paved? Is all I'm asking.
I don't know. These decisions have already been made, and it's just a matter of accumulating funds for them. And this is a heritage trail too, so it probably incorporates the history of the area, and the history of the Niagara Peninsula is extremely important because this is where the country was established. Defending this area in the War of 1812, successfully defending it, determined the fact that there would be a Canada. Thomas Jefferson said to take Canada is just a matter of marching up there and taking it, but it wasn't, and we paid the price, or the people who lived here at the time paid the price, because the western part of the Niagara River was well developed after the American Revolution. After the 1812 war, it took them 30 years to reestablish what had been burnt and destroyed here. Over 60% of the war of 1812 happened in this peninsula. So when you think of the heritage and let's not forget the multitude of Native Americans that lived in the area and helped with the fur trade and all the other things that helped Canada develop. It's very, very important. It's vital that this particular area here be preserved and be remembered. And so the Heritage Trail like that, it probably has something to do with reinforcing that.
Okay, so then the question becomes actually how well documented is the trail? Do we know, is there signs on it that actually indicate what this used to be, that you can get a historical perspective from it?
I don't know.
I presume that's where a lot
definitely is plaques and stuff like that and other trails.
Yeah, I presume that's where a lot of the money goes.
Possibly. The thing is just to get the path where people can walk. Remember, not everybody can do the rigorous hikes. The bike trail along the Niagara River there is an easy walk for the most part, but you do have to contest with bicycles too.
Well, you said it's a bike trail.
Well, yeah, it's supposed to be a bike trail, but it's also a hiking trail. So,
yeah,
I'm happy when people have little bells on their bike, because when I'm walking down the trails and they give me a ring coming up, I know enough to get to one side and to be aware that there's somebody coming up behind.
Yeah.
My son, when he was a little guy, almost got completely wiped out by a guy because he was giving it down the bike path, and my son just wandered onto the path, and the guy had to lock it up, and he was very fortunate. He just barely missed my boy. He was only 4 years old at the time. So those are mixed use pathways. So sometimes just to have one just for walking is good.
All right. Okay. Yeah, and I don't think there's anything else to be said in relation to that. So you put in a report about Burkina Faso.
Yeah, I plan to do that this week. I hope. We are focused on the Ukraine and Gaza, of course, the massacres that are happening in Gaza and the foolish war that's happening in Ukraine and Russia. Both of them.
To be quiet. So where we are, you put a Human Rights Watch article up here in relation to Burkina Faso and the problems that they are having right there. More than happy to continue this on tomorrow.
Yeah, I would just like, we could probably bring it up tomorrow, but I wanted to highlight certain areas of the world that are forgotten. And the one that is, I'm talking about like Sudan and Mali, Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso is probably the most forgotten and least reported upon tragedy that's happening in the world today. And the rest of the world seems to have ignored it and turned their back on it. If it spills out of that area into other places, though, it could be a disaster for Western Africa.
Well, Burkina Faso is actually one of the poorest countries in the planet, right?
That's right. And as a matter of fact, when I was in Ghana, some of the Canadian miners that were there would go to Burkina Faso on their days off. They were there. Their wives or something would live in houses in Ouagadougou, which is the capital, and it was just for a tax dodge, I guess. But it was really, really kind of a nice place for them to live. But one time he had come home and he had, and the guy told me that the Canadian miner says he come home and every time he come home on a Friday night, they would go to this particular cafe across the street from the main hotel. But that day his wife was sick, and so he decided not to go that time. And that was the day terrorists hit the hotel and hit the cafe. He killed six Canadians, I think. Well, 6 people in the cafe. He would have been one of them because he would have been there normally. And they hit the hotel and killed a whole pile there. And they were Islamic insurgents. So the country is suffering terribly right now. And of course, the average ordinary person is the one that's taking the hit. Most brutal of the Islamics themselves are brutal, but so is the government reaction against them. Anyway, we could talk more about that later tomorrow.
Yeah, always.
But I just wanted to bring it out into the public eye because it's for the most of us, we don't even think of that, and it's not really well reported.
Yeah, we'll talk about it tomorrow in full, and well, okay, couple of other. Is this a way of keeping land away from development? I think that that's Karen's talking about Niagara on the Lake again. Denise Potts, Caucasians in Canada birth rate is below 1.5, irreversible.
Yeah, we don't want to have kids. Women are discouraged to have children. And unfortunately, it's taking the opportunity for men to be fathers and women to be mothers away because of economic circumstances and the general idea that you're a frump if you just have children, which is very, very sad, very, very sad at all. And unfortunately, it's part of our culture to kind of disown children or disown the idea of having children. I heard women after women said, "I'm not going to have no kids. I'm not going to have no parasite living in me." Jesus, really? It's a life. It's a human life. Anyway,
parasite. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and it's part of what we need to actually continue our future.
Like, we're human beings, and to be fathers and mothers is a good thing if you can have it. I mean, it's just good.
And then when you've got couples that can't have kids, you got to feel for them, right?
Yeah, and they're struggling to have it. So you have people that denounce having children, and then there's couples that want them badly.
And want them badly, but they can't have them for whatever reason, Absolutely horrible. Anyway, okay, I think we can kind of leave it at that point.
Yes, well, thanks, Denise. That was off topic, but that's pretty interesting anyway. That talks about our immigration and why it's so valuable. We need that immigration, but seriously, our whole social attitude towards family and kids is not a good one. It's not healthy.
It needs to change, doesn't it? We need to get back to, I'm not saying large families, don't encourage large families, but at least 2 kids per family.
I would have had 5 or 6 if it was up to me.
I would
have had 5 or 6 kids. I definitely would have had, because I liked it. That was the best part of my life, being a father.
All right. No, not into 5 or 6 kids, but yeah. Anyway. All right.
3 at least. And I had 3, so I was okay. The last one was an accident, thank God.
Well, thanks for being here, everybody. And Dave?
Yes, indeed. And without further ado, I bid you adieu. Thanks, everyone, for listening.